Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Mayhem Performance Podcast. This is episode number 25. We've got an audience behind the camera, so I'm going to try to stay as energetic as I can today. And we have a coaching camp here at Mayhem this week. So we have two of our coaches that are off-site now, Connor and Tyler, that are going to join us. And we were talking before we got started about the kind of emotional roller coaster that is competing in any sport, and how we all want to perform well. We're coaches. We want our athletes to perform well. We want them to win. We want them to get on the podium. But there's also something deeper there in that competing isn't forever. And at some point it ends, or even if it never ends for you, there are things outside of competing that also matter. So I wanted to bring these two guys in because they've both played sports. Tyler just finished his CrossFit career and he's in a different phase of life. And so the question I guess I have for you guys is, how do we help our athletes and how do we help ourselves to find our identity outside of just the competition that we're doing or just the leaderboard that we're looking at the end of the day?
Yeah. You start.
To answer the question of how do we help our athletes find it, or like maybe how we use it as coaches, I would keep it simple and just say, like, taking our experiences and our stories and try to be able to, maybe empathize with an athlete that's maybe struggling in a season, or help them navigate the highs of a season. Because we all know competing has its really high highs and its really low lows. So just figuring out how to root ourselves and why we're doing it and what we're doing it for.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I always like to just take the deeper approach, but yeah, just trying to figure out, I think you said you're talking about this weekend, but trying to find the why, but not the why of like, what's going to keep me motivated every day, but like, why did you even start this sport?
Yeah.
Like really, like what appealed to you about the sport? Like, was it something that it gave you? Was it an escape from something? Did it help you like survive in your childhood? Like my story, I mean, basketball was like everything to me. Like it literally helped me survive like my childhood. So I think getting to that for an athlete is huge, because when it comes to an end and then you're faced with like, okay, I don't have anything else to help me survive anymore. What should I do? That's what I think we see a lot of athletes go into so many different things, and they become competitive. And, I see Michael Jordan do it, right? Where it's like, as soon as he ended his career, it's like, he was addicted to gambling. I don't think there's a coincidence in that, right? It's like, he was just like, I need more. So. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, just looking back, even like on my athletic career, it became almost like everything to me. And it became a very unhealthy relationship to, you talked about like you have these really robust emotions, right? You have these high highs and really low lows. So when I did well in a game, I felt like I was on top of the world. Like, no one could be better than me, and so on and so forth. And then if I did poorly, if I missed a block, if I dropped a pass, if whatever it may be, fumbled the football, then for 3 or 4 days, I was like sulking in my bed and feeling like I was the worst person in the world. But then I was so tied to those emotions that nothing else mattered. But when I think back on that, it's like, man, how narcissistic is that? Of me, because then everything was only dictated by me as opposed to trying to make an impact on others around me. And I think that's one way that I've kind of tried to reframe my mind around when I compete, and also how I talk to my clients of like, one of the things that I believe we're called to is to make an impact on others and 100%. To make the world a better place. And so even with the way that I react to really good things or really bad things does matter for those people that are around me.
100%. Yeah.
I think something too, as a coach, like shifting from being an athlete to a coach and having that mindset, is like creating a space or an environment where you're framing that for them to have those thoughts. And maybe it's something as simple as like, take all those, we talked about this a little bit in the car, of like, take all those things and how do you apply that which you applied to competing in sport, like the highs and the lows, right? And apply that to whatever that next pursuit is. Right? Like creating an environment to help them understand, man, I'm spending a lot of time dialing out on my weaknesses. How can I do that in the next phase? If that makes sense.
I think this conversation could be had with a business owner, right? Like, okay, well, how do you make sure that you're thriving in your business and you're working on those weaknesses, but not everything is tied to the success of that business, because there's got to be something outside of it, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I just think, we literally just talked about this in the car, but I do think there's parts that are so good of a sport, right? Even though I did wrap up my identity in it, man, it taught me so much.
Totally.
I think, we're all believers here, right? I think it is the kindness of God that allows us to say, hey, let's go put our identity in something to show that like, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And it's going to show us like, hey, we actually need to live our life in this way and be so dependent on Jesus. That's actually going to make us feel a lot better. Right. But all the things that I did leading up to that point, I can actually take into my relationships. I can take into my business, everything. Right. So I just think it's so important. Just not trying to curse of like, oh, I wrap my identity in that. I don't want anything to do with that anymore. So
we were talking about too in the car of like how this is kind of part of the why, but like the highs and the lows that you do experience in sport,
right.
And not, this kind of plays in letting them affect and impact others, like not letting them negatively impact others or like show people and be an example. And something we talked about was like, how do I take all that pain? How do I take all that joy or all that, like, you know, you said like the confidence and the, you know, the little swagger and confidence that you have from the win, or like the pain and suffering from the loss, and just channel it. Like, how do you learn how to do both of those things and channel it, whether that be into the next play, right? Football is nice is, you know, the next 25 seconds you're getting to go again. Baseball is a little rough,
a little bit longer
3 innings, and I had to go to, you know, wait a while. But yeah, same thing with CrossFit is like, man, brutal workout or brutal season. And no matter what, just say like, okay, I've got to go through all the things that I could have done better, and then bottle all those emotions up and then use them for something good next.
Man, that's such a good point. And it's one of the things too, I think as athletes, the ones that succeed are the ones that learn from those failures.
Oh, for sure.
But most of us are so wrapped up in the identity of the leaderboard that when we don't do as well as we want to do, then we waste 2 or 3 months of training time because we're just kind of, again, sulking those emotions, as opposed to it being, okay, I didn't do well on 25.2. I know that they had X, Y, and Z in it. How do I get better at these things? And then have that conversation with your coach, or just if you're writing for yourself, figuring it out, as opposed to, again, just being frustrated and saying, I'm never going to be good at these things. And that's true in all aspects of life. Going back to the business owner of like, if you fail a business deal, how can I get better in these conversations to build the business that I want to build? Grow
from this.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, Joe talks about this all the time, like growth versus fixed mindset. I just think it's so important to always be focused and not to like overlook failure. Like, okay, failure is just going to happen. It is. And it's okay to be upset by it, but it's like, okay, what can I do not to avoid this, but how can this shape me for who I am? What did you play in college or high school?
I was an H-back. Football.
Football, right. Football too. No, baseball.
Baseball in college.
Basketball. Okay,
but
cool.
I played them all growing up.
Yeah, but I've got to mentor a lot of high school kids that have transitioned into college, and I've seen this play out so many times where this happened for me in high school. We were like the best on our team. Yeah. Right. And it's just like, this is the best. Like, it's giving me everything I want. And then we get to college and all of a sudden we're not anymore. And then we're just like, what the heck? Oh, yeah. And sometimes like with some of the kids I've been mentoring, like they actually become the best player on their college team. So then it's like feeding into it more. And then they finish college and they're like, now what? Because they weren't good enough to play pro. Right. So it's like, but they're good enough to be the best on their college team. But then it's like, okay, now what? And I see a lot of times everything that we're using as our sport, we end up wrapping up into our relationships. Right. So for me, it's like basketball in high school is everything. I got to college and it wasn't. And I was like, okay, I feel like God is definitely working on something here. And I was like, let me get plugged into the church, and then immediately got into a relationship. And then that relationship now became my identity. I'm like, everything that I got from the sport, I want to get from the relationship. And they just create more heartache and just more pain. I'm just like, what's going on? Rather than looking at, hey, like, this is okay that my identity was wrapped up in here. What can I learn from this? What am I actually trying to chase? I think that's a huge question to ask. It's like, what are you chasing with pursuing this sport, pursuing this relationship? Because honestly, like, this is a hard realization. A lot of it's selfish. Like, I want to, this relationship because of what it gives me. Yeah.
I want to feel a certain way.
Yeah. I want to feel a certain way. Like, I'm with this person because they give me this. And a lot of that happens subconsciously. We're not like actively thinking, I'm going to this sport because it's going to give me what this is. We just know, hey, this is allowing me to feel a certain way. And I love it. And I want more of it. Right. So I just think that's so important to get an athlete aware of that. Of like, hey, it's okay that you have these desires. They're great desires. But if you wrap your entire identity into that, you're just going to end up hurting yourself in the long run.
So I guess then my question for you guys, since we kind of set that stage, is how can we continue to pursue those desires? Because I think they're healthy and God-given, but not allow that to be what creates this identity that is extremely unhealthy, with, again, the highs being super high, the lows being super low, and that being the only thing that matters in life. Like, what are the recommendations or suggestions that you'd give the athletes that are listening to this to make sure that they can go through all of those emotional roller coasters that happen in sport, but also still be rooted to something bigger than themselves.
Right. Yeah. That's a good question. I think what has transformed my life is getting people in my life to ask me hard questions of like, why does this keep happening to me? Like, why do I get to the end of myself of like, I don't know what to do anymore? Like my sport has ripped me apart. This relationship has ripped me apart. And instead of trying to figure out something else to fulfill that, let me go get help and actually figure this out. Because having somebody from like a 30,000 foot level looking at my life and being like, hey, like, I can see from your upbringing, this led you to this, and this is why you're doing this. I'm like, oh, you know what? That makes so much sense. But it's hard to do. It's hard to admit like, hey, these are my failures and let somebody in on that. But I think that's a huge first step is letting somebody in. Yeah.
Sure. I think, just, I guess we're all sitting believers here. So I think like having a Christ-centered life and truly diving into what that looks like, right? Because if somebody would have told me back when I was playing high school baseball, my goal was only selfish pursuit and like what I could get out of it. And I wasn't, mature. I'm not saying I'm mature now. I still have a really long way to go. And I need people pulling me along the way. Right. But until you realize like your need for like something bigger, that just is a huge step in the right direction of not letting the highs and lows of competition sway you. Cause you know what, inviting Christ in your life and pursuing that looks like.
Right.
And I can give a specific example of that would be, whenever you look at things as like, why is this happening to me versus why is this happening for me? Right. Like whether it's positive or negative, again, kind of referring back to how can I take this and make something good out of it? How can I take failures and struggles and help the next one in line,
right,
per se?
Yeah.
And having that center.
Yeah, I think that, man, that just triggered something to me because I remember being in college and I would always ask that. I'm like, why is this happening to me?
I still ask that question, I know, unfortunately.
Like, why am I going through this? And I just remember just questioning everything. I'm like, what am I supposed to do in my life? Like, who am I supposed to be with? I think that was my biggest questions. What am I supposed to do and who am I supposed to be with? I was just like so fixated on that. And I think it was such a big deal to me because I knew I didn't feel peace with who I was with and what I was doing. And I didn't know, what to do from that. And until I like sought help, I was like, my goodness, like I've been at this the wrong way the entire time. And I was so fixated on this Bible verse of like, God gives us the desires of our heart. I'm like, God, this is what I want. Why are you giving it to me? and it was really until like you take that whole verse into account, right? It's like delight in the Lord. Context, which is so true, right? It's like everyone's like, God's gonna give me what I want. And it's like, no, it's like delight in Him first. Allow Him to come in and make your desires new. And it's not even like if you have a desire to be seen, it's not like He's going to get rid of that desire, but He's going to maybe make it come out in a different way, right? Maybe in a way that you never thought of, right? And I think that for me, that was the biggest change up of like, what would it actually look like for me to just give up everything I thought my life should look like and just really delight in the Lord. And that shook me up. And now like I get to wake up and obviously there's stuff that still happens in my life that feel hard, but I don't feel confused by it. I'm like, I have peace that this is what God's calling me to. These things are coming in my life to mold me more into I'm supposed to be, either for the coach I'm supposed to be, the husband I'm supposed to be. But I don't feel so much confused as I did in college because I'm just like, this is what God's calling me to do. And all these things that are coming in are either trying to get me out of that path or just make me stronger on this path. So,
yeah. I always think back to like, in training, especially let's just like narrow it down to CrossFit. Athletes are so willing to do the hard thing to get better.
Right.
But oftentimes we're not willing to handle the hard thing to get better in life.
Man, yeah,
and so I think that's like kind of a way that I've reframed my mind. And then I stole this from Simon Sinek. He has a book called The Infinite Game, but one of the things in there, he talks about kind of the concept, right, is there are these finite games in life, right? That's your football or baseball or basketball. Like there are these rules and standards and there's an end point and the entire point of the game is to win. Right. And those are good and healthy and God ordained. Right. But there's also this bigger infinite game. Right. And that is the constant pursuit of excellence and the constant pursuit of improvement in whatever you're called to do.
Right.
And so I think it's also important, this is a conversation I have with my athletes, is make sure that you're playing both.
Right.
You still want to play that finite game. We're playing CrossFit. And I know that may sound silly, but like that's what we're doing, right? For some of us, maybe it's a professional sport. For some of us, it's a hobby, but we all want to get better. We all want to PR or snatch or get our first ring muscle up or go to this competition and qualify for the first time. But while we're doing that, if we don't have this underlying foundation of what is the infinite pursuit, what am I getting out of this for everyone else around me and for my own good, that's going to allow me to be able to stay in this for a long time, it becomes that emotional roller coaster. 100%. And there's nothing good that comes from that at the end of the day. So he talks about this concept of the just cause. And obviously he's doing this from, maybe more of an atheistic perspective, and that's perfectly fine for his book. But like the way I've pulled it back is like, what is God called me to in my life? Right. And I think back to, obviously there's a ton of scriptures, but like a super simple one is 1 Corinthians 10:31, where it's whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it to the glory of God. Right. So like if my first pursuit, I'm still playing these finite games, my first pursuit is to do everything that I do for the glory of God. It reframes how I attack CrossFit or how I do business or whatever else it may be. And then I think the other thing too, not to ramble too much, but like once I had a family and like started having kids, that just cause also became them. Right. Like how the most simple things of if I'm tied up into the leaderboard and I do poorly on a workout, and then I come home and I'm just disappointed and frustrated. And so therefore I don't treat my wife the right way. I don't talk to my kids, and all they see from me is daddy only cares about that. Right. What am I teaching them?
100%.
So I think that's really helped. And obviously not everyone's in that same situation, but like there's still others that you care about. It's like, maybe it's a spouse, or maybe it's a close friend or whatever. It's like, how are we impacting them with the way that we react to the difficult situations in our life? So those are just a couple of encouragements for those that are listening to this.
Yeah, man, that's so good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just feel like that has been my journey as an athlete of like, I have let everything in my athletic journey affect everything around me. Right. So it's like, if this wasn't going my way, well, it's going to carry into my relationships. It's going to carry into my workplace. Yeah. Like I'm not going to be able to sleep at night because I didn't do as well as I wanted to. And that's where I'm just like, this is not how God's called me to live. Yeah. This is not what he wanted for my life. And I, even now being married, it says that we're supposed to love our wives like Christ loved the church. That's a huge freaking calling. So convicting, right? And I'm like, okay, well, if that is what I'm called to do, right? I'm never going to do that in perfection. I know that. But if that's where I'm striving to be like, man, how many things do I need to make sure that I'm doing in a day to set that up, right? And that's the huge kicker in all this is I agree in sport, like, and especially in CrossFit. I love freaking going hard. Like, give me a 30 cal all bike, 30 cal, max bike effort into like max burpees, right? I love that. Just go as hard as you freaking can. But as crazy that it is, as hard as that is, right? I think a lot of times we're unwilling to actually make the harder decisions of like, you know what? Let me go and like actually work on these things that are like deeply wounded in me. Cause that's the hard thing, to have a vulnerable conversation. Like we had a great conversation today. That's hard to do, man. And I think that is more so of what, if we look at how Jesus lived his life and he says, hey, we got to pick up our cross daily. That's not an easy thing to do. Yeah. And from my perspective, how I live my life, I love being in the word, but I would say that's easy for me to do. What's hard for me to do is to show up in my wife's and I's premarital counseling and admit things and say, this is where I failed. This is where I wasn't a manly, godly husband to my wife. Right. That's freaking hard. And then to like cry and show emotion, that's just, again, from my perspective, but I'm just like, I know that's what God's calling me to do more so in my life, because that's making me more like him. It's making me able to love my wife like Christ loved the church. Yeah. So
go ahead.
If you have a thought, I was going to ask you a question.
I was going to say, we could go about 5 different ways right now, but I just want to touch on 2 things. I like that reference to that book, but a mentor of mine made it really simple for me one time. I'm a simple-minded kind of guy. Like, just make a picture for me. Like, don't try to over-explain it. 5th grade, please. Yeah, 5th grade, please. Pictures, preferably.
I prefer that too.
Me too.
He basically was like buckets. And I was younger at the time. I was trying to do things the right way. And he was like, you got all these buckets you're stressing about, and you may be letting trying to fill up one bucket more affect other bucket. Right. He was like, there's one big bucket. He didn't say what it was. He was like, you know exactly what it is. Overflow that, and you'll wind up distributing things the way they're supposed to be. Yeah. And that was like super impactful for me.
Right.
On your what you said, just something that's like applicable is like, it's not by nature that we just choose to do hard things, right? So like we talk about stepping into your calling and like doing what you're supposed to do, but sometimes that can get super comfortable. Yeah. And it's almost up to us to be like, okay, it's time to get uncomfortable, or God's going to be like, I'm going to make you really uncomfortable till you learn the lesson.
Right.
Yeah. Along those lines, Tyler, I just have a question, because you've experienced kind of the end of a very high level, like professional career in CrossFit into another high level professional career as a coach. So what has that experience been like for you? And like, maybe give us a couple of things of what you've learned along the way over the last year as you transitioned from, a high level CrossFitter to now a high level coach.
Man, I have a laundry list of things I've learned from the staff that I'm around. I feel so like, man, talking about, I'm a prime example, everyone, for being the dumbest in the room. So I'll just leave that there. It's been very humbling and growthful, but it's, I just thought of it as like, whenever I'm finished with this pursuit, I'm going to go at it as hard as I can and make the most out of it. And then my turnaround was, I don't want to sit in the like pity or in the sorrow or whatever of what anyone that knows my story or the last 4 or 5 years have been like. I immediately wanted to try to like give it back and try to help the next in line and maybe help them avoid some of the mistakes that I made. It's kind of like my thought process on that.
Yeah.
And how to frame that. Again, what I said earlier of like, how do you frame an environment and then make it custom to each one and knowing what each one, and that I've been learning that too, is like not one way fits for, for everyone. They all might handle it differently. Like my, the vocabulary and language that I use with one may not fly with another one. They might even potentially take it the wrong way. And you could probably tell me as a coach something that would fire me up and you wouldn't have to say much and it could be explicit.
Yeah.
And I would go, and some may not be wired that way. They might care. They might care more that I care about other things than that. It just all depends. So I've learned, man, so much. I could go down a whole list, but like coaching each athlete individually, really like understanding their essence. And that's a big one for me, at least that I'm on right now.
Right.
What about like just going from the day-to-day grind of training and competing, and obviously you wanted to win. And like we said, like I want to re-emphasize that is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think God has called us to pursue excellence in everything that we do. But then you go from doing that on a regular basis, probably multiple training sessions a day. And I know you're still training, you're still extremely fit, but then the focus is no longer there. So kind of how did you start to fill the time to make sure that you're continuing to better yourself as a person?
Honestly, I didn't treat it any differently than like when I got into CrossFit. I knew I wasn't great at CrossFit and I just kept showing up every day, and kind of same thing with coaching, like learning the intricacies of helping each individual with nutrition or each individual with program design, or, managing their lifestyle and even like managing a changing schedule. So that was definitely different, but I didn't treat it much different than just like knowing I got to get uncomfortable as quick as I can. And then like, I'm going to make mistakes and try to grow the best I can and put myself around people that know way more than I do.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Man, you guys have both said this too. And I think it's one of the most important things is getting around other people that are willing to challenge you and hold you accountable. Even if you're not in maybe the business world or doing coaching, if you're an athlete, you need to get around people, other athletes that hold you accountable, and other coaches or people at your gym or whatever it may be, a support system that allows you to continue to improve as an athlete.
100%. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's, I think the purpose of the church is, it's like, what does it look like for us to actually live in community? Right. And not like this surface level community, like, hey, we're just going to go do hard things and just go do burpees. It's like, no, like, what does it look like for us to have a vulnerable conversation, right? And like, hey, this is what I'm really struggling with, right? And where can I go from here, from this, and how can I have support with that? I just think that's huge. That is something that I'm trying to instill in my young athletes that I'm coaching. Like, they transition to college. I'm like, hey, you need to make sure you go and find community. And like, yeah, I am. Like, I'm hanging out with friends, and I'm like, yeah, but we're talking a lot about your anxiety and all these things you're going through. It's like, do any of your friends, your community, know about that? Like, no. I'm like, well, what would it look like for you to actually go and find people like that? Because that, to me, is what a community looks like. It's like you can call somebody at any time of the day to talk about something that's like super hard for you. So, yeah.
Connor, you were talking about this like framework that you use.
The window of tolerance.
Yeah. You want to explain that?
Yeah. So, I'm really excited. So I'm going to school this semester for counseling, which is really fun. So the last 3-4 years, I've been like literally neck deep in all of this stuff. And Dan Siegel is like a neurologist, and he does a lot of like stuff with the brain and how trauma affects your brain and everything. And he created this thing called the window of tolerance. And it's just this diagram that kind of shows us where we go into a stress state, right? It's kind of like a fight or flight thing, but he uses the language like hyper arousal or hyper, or hypo, sorry, or hyper, and then like the free state is in the middle. And basically the window either shrinks or expands based off of our regulation, right? So like if I'm more grounded, I'm more regulated, I'm able to withstand more emotional adversity, right? So you think about it from a CrossFit perspective, right? If I'm able to go into a competition, I'm underneath the lights, it's like an open announcement. Like I'm able to handle more because I'm going into that so grounded, right? Versus imagine if the night before, like I'm up until 2 a.m., maybe arguing with my partner, I didn't eat or sleep as well, and I'm going into, I'm just so out of it, right? I'm not going to be able to either, honestly, even go as deep as I would want to in a workout, and let alone have the right mindset. So he creates this diagram to help us to understand how can we expand this, one, to handle more, right? Then also be able to provide in a relationship, like care to the other person. So I think from a coach's perspective, it's like if my window is really small and an athlete comes to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I hate how I did on the open leaderboard, I could like fire back at them. And I'm like, well, we're not training for it. Versus if I'm like coming from like a ground state, I'm like, you know what? It's okay. Like what's going on for you? Like get more curious with them and like even offer them more kindness so I can actually help them grow, versus me, I get so defensive because my window's so shrunken because of everything that's happening in my life. Right. So it's a lot of like awareness. It's a lot of attunement to yourself. They use a lot of language like, becoming curious. I think that's huge. Just becoming curious of like, hey, why is my reaction this way? Why am I so upset about how I'm performing on this leaderboard?
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to kind of like the main point we were making earlier of like finding something that you can root yourself in that's bigger than yourself, because that does create this groundedness that you otherwise wouldn't have. 100%. Like if it only is this one thing, this one pursuit to get on the podium or to get, this number on the leaderboard, then when things either go well or they don't go well, both ends, because like, what happens if you win? Like, does that satisfy your soul? And what happens if you lose? Are you going to just, go in this death spiral toward destruction? Either way, if you're more grounded, then you do open up that kind of exposure to being a little bit more calm in the moment. 100%. And you usually will perform better that way too.
I think in CrossFit, from a dynamic of athletes, I think we've done this really well, is Rich and Ariel Lowen. From where I've studied, right? It's like, you look at Rich's story, it's like, he was coming in second place and then he had this huge like moment where it's like, hey, I got to really focus on God in this, and grounded himself. And he became the best in the world. Yeah. Right. And then you look at Ariel Lowen's story, like she was literally trying to make the games every single year and quit at 29 or something like that and said, I don't want to do it anymore. And then the next year did it for fun, has her family, has all this support, and it ends up making the games. Yeah. I don't think it's a coincidence, right? It's like, hey, like my identity is now, it doesn't belong in this. So I can go and compete freely. Not like, yes, I want to win. Yes, I want to beat the person next to me. But at the end of the day, if they do, I'm okay. And I think that's something that's so hard for people to get to. It's like, I'm not going to be okay unless I win. And if I don't win, I'm going to quit this sport and go try something else. I'm going to quit this relationship and go try something else. I'm like, can you just be okay with the failure? And then how can we learn from this, like you're saying, and everything? But I just think we've seen those athletes do it the best. And Ariel Lowen is like going up against these girls that are coming in that are twice her age, or younger than her.
Half her age.
It's insane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just think that speaks volumes. It's like, man, having something that you can lean on. For us, it's God in our community, right? But it's like, I just don't really know how anybody else does it any other way, right? But it's having to have something so much bigger than you that no matter what you're doing in your day to day, you're not so affected by it.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. To wrap up, I guess I'll put you guys on the spot. Like what's one tip that you would give those that are listening to this on how you keep yourself rooted? Obviously, I know you talked about God and community, but anything like maybe a practical, like more tangible piece of advice that you do on a daily basis or you think about as you go through your day-to-day life?
I mean, I'll give two. One is to write down my why, like write it down why I'm doing it and what I'm pursuing. And then a simple practical application would just be like, get in the word every morning. Like if I do that, I just notice how like exponentially better like my days are. Yeah. My ability to practice patience and have if I have a larger window?
Yeah, larger window.
I grow my window.
Grow your window. Yeah.
Which one is it? Smaller or larger?
Yeah, I love that. Man, I think I'd have to go back to what I was saying. It's just like having a mentor, having a counselor, having a coach that can help keep you accountable, and you let in on it. It's like, hey, this is my why. I want you to know it. I want you to know what I feel like God's calling me to, and I really need help getting there because I can't do this by myself. I'm going to try and I'm going to fail. So I need you to like help me along that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
I got a long one for you.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
How do you know your why? No, I'm kidding. Save it for another podcast.
Next question.
All right. I'll wrap it up with just one more. I think it's gratitude for me. All of these things are all great and things that I want to be able to continue to do in my life. Have a community, be rooted in the word, know your why, but like also just be thankful that we get to do what we get to do. And I think people lose that again in the heat of competition. We no longer are thankful for our ability to do that.
Right.
So continue to have gratitude in everything that you do, having the opportunity to train and to compete at a high level or compete maybe at a lower level, but continuing to see progress. Like it's a much better way to live than being frustrated and having a ton of anxiety just because you feel like you're not quite making the progress that you want.
Yeah.
How do you practice that?
I write down the things that I'm thankful for. And then in my prayers, like I literally just will have gratitude prayers, being thankful for the things that God has given me on a regular basis. Yeah. Totally.
I just think that's so important because, you look, Joe, I think preaches this more than anyone about why journaling is such a good practice to do. So I think, especially as believers, we just tend to forget so much.
Totally.
Like forget the word, forget the blessings, forget all the things we could be thankful for. And as you're talking, I'm just like, man, that is so true. It's like the more gratitude I have for like what I'm experiencing, the more grounded I am.
Yeah.
So the more I can go into competition and look around, I'm like, this is awesome, right? This is so cool. I had the opportunity to do this, right? I mean, it blows my mind that I can still beat my open scores from 3 years ago because I go into it and I could care less.
Yeah.
Right. And like 3 years ago, I was like yelling at my wife to like get out of the way. Like, you need to be, you know what I mean? But I was so
I've done
concerned.
that before too.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So I think that is just like, hey, let's being aware is like, I get to do this. Like I get to move my body. I get to push myself to the absolute limits because of how awesome this is.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. I'll wrap it up with a fun story because I was talking about doing prayers of gratitude. So at night, sit down and pray with the kids before they go to bed. And usually I'll do some gratitude time in there. And I'll ask them if they want to pray. And of course they don't want to go to sleep, right? Like they're like, I want to stay up. So I'll ask them to pray. And my son, he'll say like a 10-minute prayer. But it's not because he's working on his prayers, but he knows as soon as that prayer's done, he has to go to bed. So he'll be like, Jesus, thank you so much for the door and for this room that I have. And then he just like is continuing to think of things. For the dog, thank you for the food that I ate today. And like he just will go through it's just the most random stuff, but it's so funny. But I absolutely love that we're instilling that in our kids. So
I love that. That's great.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.